Support for WKGC Public Media comes from listeners like you, people who believe in the power of local radio to inform, inspire, and connect the Emerald Coast community. Your gift helps keep educational and entertaining programs on the air while creating hands-on learning opportunities for students. Become a listener supporter today and give securely at WKGC.org. WKGC, education, entertainment, and everything in between. From WKGC Public Media, this is ReelTalk, the place where you can join the cinematic conversations frame by frame each week. I'm your host, R.L. Terry. If movies are your thing, you're in the right place. Colonel Mustard in the library with the wrench. Today we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of one of the most brilliantly bonkers comedies ever put to film, Clue. Yes, that's right, listeners. The all-star farce that took a simple board game and spun it into a madcap symphony of wit, absurdity, and talk about razor-sharp timing. Brilliant writing, everybody. Clue wasn't always the beloved cult classic, though, like it is today. In '85, it was pretty much a box office flop. Funny how that happens. Believe it or not, this is the time of year in which many people are rewatching Wizard of Oz, and I'm not talking about the Wickeds that are in the cinemas, folks. The original Wizard of Oz, it too was kind of a box office flop for MGM at the time. Just goes to show what time can do, and once that cult following latches on to a cinematic work. But I digress. Audiences didn't quite know what to do with a movie that offered 3 different endings, each shown in a different theater. It was a marketing gamble, absolutely. Ahead of its time, without question, but that creative swing was kind of a bit of a miss. That willingness to break the rules, I absolutely love, though, and is only in part of what makes Clue such a comedic treasure. It's a movie built on the joy of surprise, the pleasure of misdirection, and the absolute commitment of a cast. I'm hard-pressed to think of an ensemble cast this large, this committed. The absolute commitment of a cast who understood that the only way through all the chaos was to sprint full speed into and through it. And what a cast, folks. This is an ensemble where every performer fires on all cylinders. Madeline Kahn, Tim Curry, Eileen Brennan, Michael McKean, Christopher Lloyd, the list goes on. These actors weren't just funny, they were fearless. Their delivery is so airtight, so exquisitely timed, that the film still feels fresh 40 years later. Who couldn't forget the singing Telegram Girl's abrupt entrance and the even more abrupt exit?
Da-da-da-da-da-da. I am your singing telegram.
Or Madeline Kahn's volcanic ad-lib, flames on the side of my face.
Flames on the side of my face. Heaving breaths.
Which remains one of the greatest comedic line deliveries in cinema history. 40 years later, Clue endures because it is a rare combination of comedic precision, narrative playfulness, and sheer audacity. It knew exactly what it was, even if the box office at the time did not. And today we're giving it the celebration it deserves, a look back at how a movie once left for dead became one of the most beloved cult classics of its generation and, dare I say, all time. Joining me today is returning guest, fellow film critic, and friend of the show, Sean Boelman. Welcome back to the show, Sean.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk Clue.
Oh, I am too. Thank you so much for being here. Sean, listeners, is a member of the Critics' Choice Association and the Critics Association of Central Florida, of which I too am a member. And when he isn't on ReelTalk, you can find Sean at Fandom Wire, or if you're in Austin, at the local Alamo Drafthouse Cinema there. For those that have been living under a rock and are unfamiliar with this masterclass in cinematic comedy, Sean, what's it all about?
Yeah, so Clue initially presents itself as this somewhat straightforward whodunit, but eventually it's revealed that these suspects, the characters we know from the board games, the characters that
Mm-hmm.
the players can play, have all been invited to the dinner party by a mysterious figure who turns out to be blackmailing them. And then someone dies, as you would expect. And then there are a bunch of twists and turns happening in the mystery of who's dying, who's not dying, who the murderer was, where it happened, and what the weapon was.
Yeah, it's like Agatha Christie on speed.
Yes.
So, so Sean, there's so much to talk about, and I'm afraid 1 hour isn't enough. But I hope we're over the course of the next 50, 55 minutes that we're able to touch on the highlights and inspire folks who may have seen it once and haven't revisited it in a while to go back and watch it, particularly as we've got a long weekend coming up for many folks. So perfect time to watch it. And it does have a dinner, so I guess it fits Thanksgiving, and it's a dinner party after all. But Sean, what do you think makes Clue immediately stand apart from other comedic mysteries? Because I want to get this out right up here in the front, because we've had others that, while not replicating it, are like it, perhaps. But those movies back then and today don't quite hit all the same marks. In short, I know it's Clue's tone, pace, and ensemble chemistry. I mentioned some of that in the opening. But beyond the obvious, what makes Clue different from the like movies then, and even probably more specifically, the like movies today?
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference for me, and I think it's funny that you mentioned Agatha Christie, is that the influence, like the primary influence of Clue, is not Agatha Christie. Like when you think of whodunits, Agatha Christie is like the queen, basically. She is not necessarily the originator, but she is
Mm-hmm.
the person who popularized this genre of mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, anything that's trying to satirize or be a parody of
Mm-hmm.
mystery movies or mystery novels is referencing Agatha Christie. And I think what makes Clue stand out is that it's not beholden to the
Mm-hmm.
formula of an Agatha Christie
Mm.
novel. It's
Hmm.
beholden to the structure of a board game. And
Hmm.
so, in that way, it's not following the same arc that you're used to seeing a murder mystery do,
Mm-hmm.
just with humor thrown in. It's
Mm-hmm.
doing something completely different that you haven't seen other murder mysteries do, for better or worse. I
Hmm.
personally think for better, obviously.
Yeah.
In the day that it came out, people didn't think it for better,
No.
but I definitely think it for better that it's doing this very different structure to its mystery.
Yeah, it's funny. Kind of a quick little detour here. We've got Tim Curry and Rocky Horror, and Tim Curry and Clue, both of which were essentially box office flops, yet go on to be two of the most beloved cult classics of all time. So I guess it's put Tim Curry in your movie, and it's gonna flop, but then it's gonna win in the long run. And I imagine if I did a rewatch of Congo, I might even find that, you know what, maybe it's actually a little better than I thought, or more entertaining and enjoyable. So it's just kind of funny how that happens. And I like, Sean, that you've honed in on the apparatus of this movie. I When I was in retrospect looking at it, some of the things that stand out to me, I actually didn't pick up on that. I associated it closely with the Agatha Christie, at least in spirit, but you've given me something new to talk about. So I really appreciate that counterpoint to my initial approach to the movie. Um, so
Well,
next time I watch it, I'm going to think about it that way. But three of the
yeah,
things
I,
that
I
go ahead.
I think it's interesting because you look at the structure of the film, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you start with like I said, this somewhat conventional Agatha Christie structure. Like you have these
Mm-hmm.
people together, you introduce the characters, one of them dies. But
Mm-hmm.
then like instead of the investigation being like you take them off and they like go through their backstories and all that, and they're like interrogated by the
Mm-hmm.
detective and you don't have any of that happening. You have this
Mm.
horrendously chaotic scene of them just running back and forth
Mm.
through the different rooms because
Yeah.
that's what you do in the board game. And, I get why to an audience that
Mm.
doesn't expect that would be
Yeah.
overwhelming because it is straight chaos, that whole scene where they're running through the
Oh,
hallways.
yeah.
But I think that chaos works considering what it is trying to replicate. And I think
Ah.
you look at a lot of IP adaptations of board games and video games, and
Mhm.
they're really trying to recapture the experience of doing the actions that you do in
Mhm.
the board game or the video game. And I think a lot of
Mm.
times it falls flat and it ends up boring because it's not got that element of interactivity, and that's what
Mm.
makes that interesting. But I think it works here, them trying to recreate that gameplay style of running back and forth, partially because of what you said, because the cast is so committed, and
Mhm.
partially because it is so fast paced. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't give you any time to think, wow, I want to be asking questions. Wow, I want to be
Mhm.
actually, moving my piece on the board
Right.
because it is moving so fast.
Yeah, you said that running back and forth as if they're on the game board. I think this is a great place to point out that the house itself is very much set up like the real game board. The rooms are in the same approximate locations, the same passageways, and of course the hall, which is a room on the board, becomes the central location in the house because that's just it works for a house. Otherwise, the Clue game, if you were to make that into a literal house, doesn't work. So I think the movie did a great job of adapting the board game all the way down to the proximity of rooms and the placement of those rooms. And you're right, it is straight chaos, but it is this it's not a cacophony though. It's this beautiful symphonic
Yes.
chaos that is completely absurd, but the plotting, it is airtight. And I love the theatrical precision of everything from beginning to end. And Clue treats its ludicrous premise with the sincerity of Agatha Christie, even though, to your point, it may not follow the apparatus, but it treats it with the sincerity of an Agatha Christie play, and also the gameplay itself. And I love that, contrary to today, the humor isn't meta, it's character driven. And it is strangely classy despite its anarchist heart. From beginning to end, so much character driven material in this movie. And speaking of that razor sharp dialogue and theatrical precision, I want to touch on that here. How do you feel the film's very much theatrical style, character blocking, the dialogue, the delivery, the rapid fireness of everything help to elevate a film that perhaps on paper could have looked or felt gimmicky? And who knows? Perhaps in the writer's room, it did look a bit contrived and cheesy, but that is not at all what we get in the movie. So what are your thoughts on this theatrical element and how that helped to elevate the movie, perhaps even above what the screenplay may even, that to which it may have alluded when it was first written?
Yeah, I mean, well, if we're looking at the murder mystery genre, obviously, like we reference Agatha Christie novels as one of the
Hmm.
foundational pillars of this genre of murder mystery, but
Hmm.
also theater is another element, a very important element of
Hmm.
the history of the murder mystery. Down to now the relatively modern phenomenon of like those dinner theaters that you go
Yeah.
to, where you watch this silly murder mystery show while you eat steak that's not
Hmm.
great. But so I think that having it be theatrical, there's really not another way to do it. Like you even
Hmm.
look at like modern day murder mysteries that have like higher production value, like Kenneth Branagh's
Hmm.
Hercule Poirot films.
Right.
which are Agatha Christie films,
Yeah.
and they're still relatively theatrical. Like
Mm-hmm.
Murder on the Orient Express is set on
Mm-hmm.
a train, and
Yeah.
it's them like weaving through the train. And as much as I despise and detest Kenneth Branagh in Murder on the Orient Express, he does a good
Mm-hmm.
job of working the space
Yeah.
with the camera, of like using the train set in interesting ways.
Mm-hmm.
But it is still like inherently a confined space, and I think that's just the nature of a murder mystery, because a
Mm-hmm.
murder mystery doesn't really work if your suspects are in 20 different settings, because
Yeah.
then they can just escape if they're somewhere else. Like the thrill of the murder mystery is having all of these people in one confined space, in this case
Mm.
not a hugely confined space because it's a giant mansion,
Yeah.
but that's still like you have them in one building all together, and you have the questions of who did it or who
Mm-hmm.
done it.
Mm-hmm.
They're still among us. Are
Yeah.
they going to kill again?
Mm-hmm.
And are we going to be able to catch them, or are we going to thwart the wrong person?
Yeah.
And so I feel like without that theatrical element, none of those
Mm-hmm.
questions are there and none of the stakes are there.
Yeah, the confined space, really important to point out, because we have this, as you mentioned, this palatial mansion. However, there are only two doors that can get you in and out. One, the front door, which is supposedly locked, and then the back door-ish and the conservatory, which is guarded by the most ferocious looking, they weren't German shepherds, they were that
I'm bad with dog breeds.
oh crap. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm drawing a blank on the dogs, but it's guarded by that, so you cannot get out of this house. I think in addition to the space, the confinement, kind of like a stage is in a sense confined, and our mansion here is a stage and it's confined, that every character is treating what they say like it belongs in a tightly constructed stage farce rather than a toy-based cash-in, which I think
Yeah.
is what we get a lot today. Clue weaponizes language and the best way possible. Everything is razor sharp. Doberman Pinscher. That's it.
Okay.
Doberman Pinschers. Okay, let me get back to this. The cadence forces the actors to play with the audience, even though the audience isn't sitting there in a stage theater. They're at home. The actors never see the audience at home, but they treat you sitting in your living room as if you are sitting there in front of the proscenium on the stage. And they do all of this at such a speed that it keeps the audience totally wrapped in this delightful chase. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the characters speak as if the stakes matter,
Yeah.
ultimately making the film feel way more smart than silly. It would have been so easy for this to be a silly movie, and you and I would not be talking about it as we are today. But it is incredibly smart, and the comedy truly holds up. Now, I don't know when the first time is that you saw this movie, but I'll tell you about the first time I saw it. I was at the local public library picking out movies, as I often did on it's like Thursday, Friday nights. My mom would take my sister and me to the public library, and we would look at books, and we would wind up leaving, and but not before we went and we looked at the all the movies. And one time I picked it up because I love Clue. I've got Clue on a bookshelf, not 10 feet away from where I'm sitting right now. Clue's one of my favorite board games, and so when I saw Clue on the movie, it's like, of course I have to see this. And I think even at the time I recognized Tim Curry, but it wouldn't have been from Rocky Horror at the time. It would have been from Congo or Home Alone 2. But I recognized who that was, and I recognized Eileen Brennan from the Babes in Toyland film adaptation with her and Drew Barrymore and others. And so I recognize the characters, I pick it up, and my sister and I fell in love with it. And we watched it over and over and over again. I don't know how many times we rented that movie, but I know we rented it multiple times. And that is how I discovered it, through the local public library. And it's been a favorite of mine since. When the Blu-ray came out, what was that, last year or the year before? I got the Blu-ray because I wanted to have the best looking version that I could have at home. Sean, what was your first experience? How did you discover Clue?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't remember. I've seen this film for as long as I can remember, basically. I have a DVD copy that I think I've owned since childhood. And
Mm.
that's the one that I pulled off of my shelf. And you know this, I don't live where I grew up anymore. Like, I live by
Mm-hmm.
myself in a different city now.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved out of my family's home in college, I
Mm-hmm.
brought with me like a fraction of my DVD
Mm-hmm.
collection, and the other half stayed with my family.
Mm-hmm.
More than half. I had like a collection of like over 1,000 DVDs, and I brought maybe like 200.
Wow.
And those 200 are what I would call the essentials.
Mm.
And Clue was one of those that's in
No way.
the
Oh my
essentials
gosh.
collection.
Oh,
Um,
what a
so,
great story.
so I brought that with me. So I have it. So I don't know how long, like how I saw it the first time, when I saw
Mm-hmm.
it the first time. I just know I, loved this movie since I was very young.
Oh my gosh. I absolutely love that story and loving where we're going with this. You're listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by returning guest, film critic Sean Boelman. This hour, we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of Clue, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break.
Let us in! Let us in! Let us out! Let us out!
Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Sean Boelman. This hour, we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of Clue. Now, Sean, Clue walks a fine line between parody and sincerity. We could even throw satire in there. What does, uh, you know, what makes that mixture work? Why does that mixture work here when so many other modern adaptations lean too hard in one of those directions? We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to dive more deeply into it. Why does the mixture work here? And why does it fail elsewhere? Or maybe a better way of wording it is, why isn't it attempted elsewhere? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key to any great parody is that the parody still needs to deliver on the thing it's parodying.
Hmm.
So, like, this is a parody of a murder mystery. There
Mhm.
needs to be a good murder mystery within that, and I think there is. Like it is a twisty, turny murder mystery that's not
Mhm.
like the most predictable plot you've ever seen in your life. If you make
Mhm.
a parody of a murder mystery and you know who the killer is, it's not going to work. And I
Mm.
think one of the few modern parodies of a similar genre, not quite the same genre,
Mhm.
that is very effective is Poker Face on Peacock, the show that
Mm.
just got canceled with
Mhm.
Natasha Lyonne. Um, that one is specifically a parody of the Hal Ketchum style of murder
Mhm.
mystery. So
Mhm.
like the inverted who done it, where it's you know who the killer is, and it's about how the detective found them. So it's like more of
Mhm.
a parody of like a Columbo style mystery
Right.
than an Agatha Christie mystery. And I think
Mm.
that works because it is this parody, right? Like it is
Mhm.
funny, it's poking fun at some of the cliches of that genre, but it's also just a well crafted, entertaining mystery. And I
Mhm.
think that a lot of other ones these days that try to do that type of thing aren't really having that commitment to
Mhm.
following those tropes
Mhm.
in a way that subverts it with the comedy.
Mhm.
They're just like throwing those like conventions to the wind. And I think it's not a good thing to throw those conventions to the wind when you're parodying, because
Yeah.
you need to show some reverence
Mm-hmm.
for the genre that you are, or otherwise it's just going to be contemptuous. You know, you're just showing that you think that these movies are stupid, which is not
No.
what it should be.
No, you mentioned Poker Face as a kind of in some spiritual sense, playing with that same mixture. Would you then say that Tucker and Dale is similar in that respect? Different genre than what we're dealing with
Yes.
now. It's the slasher, but would you apply that same approach to its success, Tucker and Dale's success within the horror genre?
Absolutely. I think that's a great example of a
Mhm.
horror comedy that does a great job of, you know, being comedic, making
Mhm.
fun of the cliches of like the
Mhm.
stupid teenagers going into the woods,
Mhm.
but still like delivering a story within that genre that works.
Mm.
And I think another great example is actually one of my favorite horror comedies of all time and one of my favorite movies of all time, which is The
Mhm.
Cabin in the Woods. I
Ah,
think
great
that
movie.
one is also another example of something that does that very well.
I
Or
think.
a lot of Quentin Tarantino's films, I think,
Mhm.
do a good job of that. Like the World War II film
Mhm.
with Christoph Waltz and Brad Pitt that I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name on the air. Uh,
Mhm.
but
Oh,
that one,
Inglorious Bastards.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Inglorious Bastards. I wasn't sure if that was allowed.
Oh, no,
Um,
that's fine. Jojo Rabbit, perhaps.
Jojo Rabbit is
Mhm.
another one where it's like, yes, it is kind of parodying like
Mhm.
these War II movies, these
Mhm.
Holocaust movies that are
Mhm.
sometimes a little bit over sincere, over sentimental,
Mhm.
but then it also delivers like that emotional heft that you
Yes.
expect
Mhm.
from that story. And so I think, you know, so many modern parodies, if you want to call them parodies,
Mhm.
don't do that. And I
Mhm.
think Clue does.
I think what all those seem to have in common is there's a sincerity underneath everything,
Yep.
from the opening title cards to the closing credits. And Clue or any of those films that you and I have mentioned, none of them mock the genre that they're parodying. The characters within each of them commit to the melodrama. They commit to the stakes. The stakes feel real. They do not feel contrived or artificial. They feel real. And even though there is a farcical tension throughout Clue and these other movies, it still feels completely legitimate. It feels like a legitimate mystery. It feels like a legitimate how catch 'em. It feels like a legitimate commentary on World War II movies. And a lot of modern adaptations, to your point, they choose an extreme. They're either drawn in, which is probably more prevalent here in recent years, particularly after the first Deadpool, drawn to winking, drawn to self awareness, where nothing feels grounded. And listeners, I didn't say not funny, I didn't say not entertaining. I'm saying doesn't feel grounded, or the writers and or director cling too tightly to seriousness, and then the comedy just feels just thrown in there. Just like, oh my gosh, we have to have something funny here, have to have something funny there. It honors the structure. And you mentioned that earlier before the break, the apparatus of the movie itself. Clue honors its structure, even though it is lampooning the trappings. And I think all of that works because the film isn't trying to outsmart the genre or
Yeah.
distance itself through irony. And ultimately, what we're left with is something with warmth and wit and staying power. Staying power that starts with a flop and is beloved and makes moves halfway across the country 40 years later. So something else that I want to touch on here is perhaps the film's most enduring and exemplary dimension, the performances. Oh, that performative dimension, uncanny. It's just lightning in a bottle. Every single actor in the movie, 100% brilliant. How did this particular ensemble cast click, Sean, in a way that today's star-studded ensemble films often don't?
So, I do want to bring up an example of a modern whodunit that I think is important to discuss in this.
Okay.
Uh, as much as I like Knives Out, I really
Mhm.
enjoy Knives Out. I think it's a very funny film. I think it's a very sharp film. But I have created this rule for whodunits that I call the Knives Out rule.
Okay.
And I think it explains the issues with modern casting for modern whodunits.
Mm.
And for me, the Knives Out rule is that your highest paid actors must either be your heroes or your villains.
Mm.
And that's because today there's so much ego in billing, there's so much salary. You're not going to pay, spoiler alert, Chris Evans
Yeah.
to be, some red herring in a movie.
Yeah.
You're only going to pay him if he's going to be the hero or the villain. And obviously, we already know Daniel Craig is the hero, who
Right.
would be the other highest billed actor in Knives Out, because James Bond and Captain America, those are going to be your two people who demand the
Yeah.
biggest paycheck.
Mm.
And so I think that's the issue with modern whodunits is who the killers are going to be because they just demand that paycheck. And
Real quickly here, I don't want to derail you for too long, but I've started applying your approach to movies. You and I saw Thanksgiving together, Eli Roth Thanksgiving, when it came out in 2023, and I had it narrowed down to 2. You had it narrowed down to 1, and you were right. And it was at that moment that I'm like, his approach is almost guaranteed to pick out who your villain is going to be, because you had it, and it is a little newer, so I'm not going to spoil it, but you had it, and it is, listeners, it is because of that approach. So sorry to knock you off track there, but wanted to get that in there.
You're totally right. like it's one of those things that I picked up on, and I've had people come to me and they're like, "How are you always one step ahead of these movies?" And I'm like, because I figured out the casting. I'm like I can figure it out. And it's there are occasional subversions of that, but for the most part, again, the logic of today's filmmakers is, why am I going to pay millions of dollars for someone to just be a side character? Why would that actor who can get paid millions of dollars want to do something where they don't really have that meaty of a role, where they're just like a side character?
Hey, Betty Davis was oftentimes a side character later in her career, and she rocked it every single time.
Right. But I do think it's a difference in actors today from then. And then when Clue came out, it was a true ensemble where there are nobody was, quote, above the rest of the cast.
No.
They seemed to very much treat each other as equals. And I think that that's where the difference is between Clue and modern day.
Yeah, and we have this ensemble cast, but in Clue, unlike in Knives Out, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but unlike in Knives Out, I think one of the different, I should say, a difference with the Clue ensemble cast is because it doesn't feel, or even isn't, a collection of, quote, stars. It's a collection of character actors who understand timing, rhythm, and the harmony between characters, which you mentioned. No one's being treated as second build. They're all treating each other as top build. And even in Knives Out, there is that ranking of actors where it does feel still a great ensemble cast, listeners. I'm not knocking it, but it does feel more like a collection of stars versus Clue, which is a collection of character actors, because none of them at the time, I mean, Martin Mull maybe, but they weren't A-list actors at that time, well known perhaps. Even Leslie Ann Warren, she would have been well known, but I don't know if I would consider A-list. Leslie Ann Warren plays Cinderella in the Rodgers and Hammerstein television musical, the one from the '60s. Listeners, so if you're so like her career goes way before this, and so she played that, and so
See,
I love how they're. Oh, go
I
ahead.
always want to
Yeah,
think of Christopher Lloyd as the biggest star of this movie, but then I realize
yeah.
I think I don't know which months they came out in, but this and Back to the Future came out in the same year.
Yeah,
So
same year. This came out afterwards, but
that's what
still
I thought.
not enough time to
Yep.
cement him as an A-list actor. And I think what today's ensembles often miss is that chemistry. It's that chemistry that makes Clue work. That chemistry would make or break this movie. And in Clue, it isn't about celebrity. It isn't about star status. It's about calibration with one another. No one is trying to reinvent the wheel. No one is trying to steal the spotlight unless it's their little moments. And they all get those little moments all throughout the movie. Every single one of them, even the cook, that's little more than a bit part. Everyone is trying to keep the wheel spinning faster and faster because discipline. Talk about performative discipline with these actors. Many of them have deep roots in stage and sketch performance, which play beautifully into this. And the rule is simple: if the scene wins, the movie wins. No one's concerned about, am I winning? They are all concerned about, is this scene winning? And that approach is what I feel separates it from other movies that would try to do the same thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think you're right on the money there as to why this cast works.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever see something like it ever again because they are so there is so much ego involved today that we would
Mhm.
have people fighting over like billing,
Yeah.
and I don't think that'll happen again.
No, and there's another movie that's in the same vein. About the same time too. Except I think it was early '80s, and that's Murder by Death, which also has Eileen Brennan in it and Peter Falk. You mentioned Columbo earlier. Love watching Columbo, and he's in Murder by Death, and I like it, and I will rewatch it every few years. I don't rewatch it as often as this one. Have you seen Murder by Death?
A long time ago.
Mhm.
I obviously don't remember enough
See?
about it
Yeah.
to really comment on it, but yeah, no, I definitely think that one is not as good as Clue.
No. No, it isn't. But hey, but look, Eileen Brennan, she got to be in both that were kind of in the same vein. Both the one that was maybe the We Walk So You Could Run, perhaps, and so she got to be in both of them, which is pretty cool. I mentioned the multiple endings earlier, and multiple endings, whether today or back then, were a huge narrative risk, particularly back then. And listeners, while when you rent or buy the Blu-ray or the DVD today, you get all three. And even there is a fourth ending, which we won't get into because that gives you something to Google later. There is a fourth ending, which wasn't ever captured cinematically. In cinemas in 1985, when you went to the theater, you only got one of those endings. And so once you learned that there were multiple endings, there was kind of this prompting you to go back so you could see the different endings. But in physical media, you get all of them. Uh, this was supposed to encourage multiple trips to the cinema for them to catch each of those endings. And that's something that I don't think would work today. And so, Sean, why did that choice feel charming and even perhaps clever in 1985? It didn't feel cheap or confusing. It felt charming and clever, I would say. And you could feel free to disagree with me, but could a movie get away with that today? I'm thinking no, but I'm curious why you think that's the case. Or maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think a movie could get away with it. What are your thoughts on these multiple endings then and today?
Yeah, so there are two major examples I can think of movies that are more modern that have tried to do this or something similar.
Mhm.
One of them is X-Men Origins Wolverine,
Mhm.
which had in theaters two different endings. And I remember when I was a kid, I saw there was like a piece of paper on the poster at the Cobb Grand Tin in Winter Haven, very specific. And it had ending A and ending B, and it had which showtimes were which ending. And that one was literally the cash grabbiest thing ever because it was just trying to get you to buy multiple tickets. And it was a horrible movie. And I had intended to make my mom go see that movie twice to get both endings. And then the first time we saw it, I'm like, no, I'm not sitting through that 2 hour monstrosity again.
Okay.
And then the second example I can think of, and my argument of to how it could work again, is Final Destination 3. And
That's the roller coaster one, right?
the roller coaster
Okay.
one. And it's not something that they did in theaters. It was something they had on a DVD. And I, quote, almost broke the DVD. Not really. Like in the way that you would think of like breaking a VHS tape from rewinding it so much. I watched that movie as a kid so many times because I thought it was so cool. There was this feature that they called, I think it was Choose Your Fate. And you could go through and you could change the character's decisions and it would change like the path of the movie. So ultimately, like it would not really matter much because if you chose the decision that they died at a point that they weren't supposed to die at, it would like do that and then it would flash back as a premonition. And you would make the decision again and you would go the route that the movie was supposed to actually take. But I think that works because like that is, you know, the nature of that film is like the causality of choices is the nature of a Final Destination film. So to tie it back to Clue, I think the reason it works in Clue is because the nature of this film is a murder mystery that you don't know who the killer is, and they've structured it, and this goes back as a way to solid screenwriting. They've actually structured it as a way that multiple killers would make sense. Like there could be, you know, ending 1, ending 2, or ending 3. Just they've planted the eggs that any of these would make sense, and very deliberately so. It's not just like they haphazardly wrote it to be ambiguous so they could have whatever ending be the ending. They were very deliberate with it, and I think that's why it works. So I do think if somebody wanted to do it in the modern day, it would require very intricate screenwriting, but I think it could work.
And screenwriting is one of the things that I negatively criticize, seems like all too often these days. And so you know, perhaps the writer is out there. If you're listening today and you are that writer, here you go. Here is your mission should you choose to accept it. So what I take from what you just described, Sean, is that it could work today, but probably something that would be a special feature on Blu-ray or once it hits a streaming service where you have your multiple endings. Or am I wrong? Do you think it could work in the theater? Because I think more along, I don't think, because viewers would see it as a gimmick, or I should say many people would see it as a gimmick for box office manipulation, particularly as it's, you know, common knowledge. Theaters are trying all kinds of strategies to get people back in the cinemas after the COVID shutdown for many of the theaters. So do you think it's something that you wouldn't find in the cinema but may find on physical media or streaming, or do you think it could work in the cinema?
I definitely think the bigger potential is like home media, like DVD bonus feature or like a streaming version. But the one way I do think it would work in a theater, what we've seen a lot with musicals is that they release the musical in theaters and then they do a re-release as a sing-along for like the hardcore fans. I could see something like them doing that where it's like, you know, you have the main version that would be like our ending 3 for Clue, and then you can put it back in theaters with like a special re-release of something with like the alternate endings. And I think that could maybe be successful.
Okay, very cool. Well, you're listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Sean Boelman. This hour, we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of Clue, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break.
What do you mean? Murder.
Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Sean Boelman. This hour we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of Clue. So, Sean, if Clue were released today, same cast, same script, same structure, do you think it would still find an audience? And what might that audience look like, or maybe lack thereof?
Well, I do think that there's a bit of a challenge with
Mm-hmm.
having the same cast because obviously, some
Well,
of them are not with us anymore.
yeah.
But I do think that
If
I
they were alive. So if
right,
they were
if they were
alive.
alive, I don't know, like because
Mm,
like back then something could be sold based on the strength of its premise alone, right?
mm-hmm,
Like people, the murder mysteries were much more sellable.
mm-hmm,
Like using today's example of Knives Out, like that's very popular. I don't know if Knives Out will be as popular as it is if it didn't have Daniel Craig and
mm,
Chris Evans and Jamie Lee Curtis and all of these recognizable people. And then the sequel had, Dave Bautista and Edward Norton and all of these successful people. And now the new one has Josh Brolin and Glenn Close and
mm-hmm,
all of these successful people. So
mm-hmm,
like I don't know if having this ensemble of, like you mentioned, character actors
mm-hmm,
would resonate today. Like I'm trying to think
mm,
of like the equivalent of what it would be today because you don't really see movies that are just like this ensemble of character actors anymore.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Outside of like,
Maybe would you say that's because we don't really have character actors anymore? Of course, one of the most famous living character actors, Robert Englund, finally got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on Halloween. Very apropos. But maybe he's not really active anymore.
I mean, we definitely do have character actors, like famous character actress Margot Martindale, calling back the BoJack Horseman joke. But
Mm-hmm,
we do have people like that, and I do think that like some elements of those ensembles for
mm-hmm,
Knives Out are people who I would consider character actors, like Michael Shannon. I would
mm.
consider like a character
Okay.
actor, where like he's great, he's a fantastic actor. He rarely does like leading stuff though. Like he's
Mm-hmm,
usually like a firmly pretty supporting actor.
mm-hmm,
So I think that that would be the situation
mm,
that would hold it back from today, is that we don't really have these major mainstream films with an
mm-hmm.
ensemble that's not led by multiple A-listers if it's an ensemble.
So, if I follow what you're saying, that there is the potential to still find an audience today, but who that audience is and how they connect with the movie may look a little different. Because I think what we have here is keeping much everything the same. Uh, the film's timeless dialogue, the ensemble, and that great script would still resonate with viewers, but it'd be viewers who are by and large kind of in the minority who crave sharp, character-driven comedies. Of course, that's in large part because we don't get very many of them anymore. And so Clue's small scale, we talked about beauty and simplicity in several different ways all throughout the hour. So it's beauty and simplicity and its cleverness would feel refreshing, but the alternatively, and where I think it may struggle, is today's media landscape tends to distrust comedies that rely on wit instead of spectacle.
Yeah,
And so the three ending gimmick probably get, we mentioned earlier, probably something for streaming or physical media. Social media would probably turn the quotable moments, particularly flames on the side of my face. I mean, that's instant viral meme right there. So I think it would find an audience and maybe an even bigger one than an 85, but I don't think it's going to find one in the same way. I think it'll be a louder minority who really
yeah,
praise it because of that. But you're right.
and
The
I,
way movies are now, using Knives Out as the example of Knives Out was full of character actors instead of the A-list cast, it may not have done as well. People may not have seen it because premise alone, even though I think should drive people to the cinema, I think you and I can agree that nowadays, whether we like it or not, premise alone, writing alone, unfortunately, isn't what drives people to the cinema.
Yeah, and I think the closest we'll get today to something that's ultra successful with like an ensemble cast of people who are maybe not necessarily today's A-list stars
Mm-hmm.
is Only Murders in the Building, because
Ah.
we do have Martin Short and Steve Martin, who are like those nostalgia plays for a lot of audiences, myself
Mm-hmm.
included. That today outside of that aren't necessarily A-listers,
Mm-hmm.
because like they're like those guys who are like this is like their second coming basically.
Mm-hmm.
But then you do have Selena Gomez, who is like ultra popular. So like
Yeah.
even that, like you have these two stars who used to be big stars who aren't as much anymore, but you still have to partner them with somebody who is a current star for it to work. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where, you know, the closest we'll get to it is like if we had somebody like, Tim Curry, if he were healthy,
Yeah.
and Christopher Lloyd, we could have like the two of them if we also had like a Sabrina Carpenter thrown into the mix
Yeah.
or something like that.
Mm.
I think that could work, and be like a massive mainstream hit.
Mm.
But I think that's the closest we get. I don't think we get something where it's like
Mm.
exclusively these character actors.
Yeah. Yeah. So truly lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
As we near the top of the hour here, Sean, I'd be remiss not to touch on anything that you felt we missed in our celebration of Clue this hour. So, anything else that you want to make sure we spotlight before we begin wrapping up here in the next few minutes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for me is that I think Clue is like one of the most successful adaptations of an IP that we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are very few adaptations that really nail that balance between being a good product of its own right and
Mm-hmm.
also paying homage to this specific thing. This case being a board game. It's a very unpopular opinion,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people don't like this movie, but I think another one that I really liked that I thought did a good job of it was Battleship, with
Hmm.
Liam Neeson and Taylor Kitsch.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people did not like that movie at all. I actually quite liked that movie. I thought it was a fun sci-fi, stupid, turn your brain off,
Mm-hmm.
loud, big budget explosion movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it also did a good job of kind of like being a battleship thing where it's
Yeah.
like we're blowing up things based on like coordinates and stuff. So like I feel like I don't know why more people don't really try to attempt these these adaptations of these things that strike that balance. Like
Mm-hmm.
usually it's like, okay, we either have to be super faithful to the original IP or we have to just completely diverge from it. And I feel like Clue is like that perfect middle ground where it
Yeah.
does that balance. And
Yeah.
I feel like there are very few examples of
Yeah.
adaptations that do that.
Yeah, the tonal balance, you mentioned it. Clue strikes a tonal balance it's just razor's edge precise. It walks a comedic tightrope that almost no other film has pulled off, even though many have attempted. It's a farce, but there's some satire in there. There's mystery, a lot of screwball comedy, and plenty of campy theatrical romp. And it never winks too hard. There's a couple of moments where there's a little bit of a wink at the audience, even a halfway wink, but it never winks too hard. It never breaks its own reality. And ultimately, what separates Clue from so many others is it never panders. It trusts the audience. And I think that is
Absolutely.
so very rare today. And all these elements we've talked about, they speak as one singular voice. It's a movie that feels meticulously crafted while it's also completely unhinged and elevated in every way possible. And before we wrap up, real quickly here, Sean, if you were to pick another board game, say it's Stratego, Monopoly, Shoots and Ladders, I mean, pick one. Is there another movie that you would like to see adapted? Another movie, another board game. Another board game you would like to see adapted into a movie. And we'll imagine that we have a great writer, great director, great cast. So we're just picking the property here. So what other board game do you think would make for a fun movie adaptation?
That's a good question. I think Risk would be a fun board game adaptation.
Ooh,
I'm,
I
I'm a
could see
big fan
that.
of Risk, the game, and I could
Mhm.
see, them doing like a kind of like riff on a war movie,
Okay.
but not too overly serious.
Mhm.
But I feel like that could lead to some really fun like battle sequences, and I think that's something that has a lot of opportunity to do something that uses an interesting mechanic. Like we mentioned,
Mhm.
how Clue uses that interesting mechanic. The Clue movie
Mhm.
uses that interesting mechanic, while paying homage to and subverting the genre.
Mhm. So I think that's a great example. And like you, I also very much enjoy Risk. I think a Monopoly adaptation could be a lot of fun, particularly today. I think it would feel very relevant today, and I think could be incredibly funny but thoughtful at the same time. I haven't quite worked out all the mechanics, but I think it could be a lot of fun to watch, and I think it's one that could also be very thoughtful in its approach, because the economy is relevant to everybody. so,
Yeah,
so I think it could be a lot of fun, but also I think it provides a creative opportunity to talk about some of the economic conditions of today in a way that's fun and may even invite everybody to the table to address the elephant in the room, as it were. So I think that could be a lot of fun, a Monopoly adaptation. That we'll see. We get more video game than board game adaptations, but we'll see if we get any of those here in the future. But Sean, thank you so very much for joining us today. For listeners that would like to follow you on social media or read your reviews, how can they connect with you?
yeah. Thank you for having me. My reviews are on fandomwire.com. That's where I'm writing. And then for my social medias, you can check me out on Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, and Letterboxd as Big Tuna on Film.
Excellent. And if you missed any of today's episode, listeners, or to listen to past episodes of Real Talk or other shows on WKGC, we are on a podcatcher near you. Just search for WKGC Public Media on your podcast service of choice. Real Talk will be back next Monday with another cinematic conversation. But until then, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving and a kickoff to the Christmas season. If I may recommend a couple of movies for you to check out, mentioned one earlier in this show, Eli Roth's Thanksgiving and the classic Planes, Trains, and Automobiles over the holiday weekend. But for now, stay tuned for Jazz in a Minor Key with Walter Hale coming up next, followed by The Afternoon Spin with DJ Maggie. Thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you'll tune in again next week, same time, same place, for more Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. Support for WKGC Public Media comes from listeners like you, people who believe in the power of local radio to inform, inspire, and connect the Emerald Coast community. Your gift helps keep educational and entertaining programs on the air while creating hands-on learning opportunities for students. Become a listener supporter today and give securely at WKGC.org. WKGC, education, entertainment, and everything in between.